I started my employment out of college answering the phones at JANM, 1999. It was not even the 21st century. And I left once, but I've come back, and part of the reason I keep returning is because I love the collection. It is the thing that made me fall in love with doing history research. We have such a remarkable collection in this institution, and now that I've worked at other institutions, I can tell you even more how special this collection is. And we have so many more things than could ever be on display. But what I really wanted to do with this exhibit was, one, trying to tell the story of younger Nisei and those Nisei, and also older Sansei, because I know some who were Sansei. Where's the Sansei coming? So, Nisei, older Sansei, those who were children in camp, whose stories really tend to get overlooked when we tell the camp experience. It tends to be more focused on the older Nisei, like those who served in the 442 and MIS, or the parents, or teenagers, people who could go off to college, not the kids. But the kids were a very large part of the camp experience, and they're a large part of what made this museum possible. It's also a really important story. So I wanted to make this an exhibit. It's about camp, but it's a different way of looking at camp. It was an attempt to look at it through the eyes of those who were younger, who were coming of age. So, what they now call tweens, I guess the kids call them, late elementary, junior high school kids, who are going through their own changes, right? Being that age is complicated and difficult wherever you are, whenever. But to go through coming of age, to enter adolescence, to do all those things within the confines of camp. What was that like? But I also saw this as an opportunity to really share the amazing things we have in our collection, and to share things that we've never shared before. So, for example, this photo, which you've all seen now, so part of this, the challenge sometimes, and I want to give you a little insight into doing exhibits, some of the really tedious stuff that leads to amazing discoveries. So we have a database. In that database is records of everything. But depending on how records are entered, not every single individual object is described. So for example, this photo is part of a group of photos, and the group of photos is not described individually. So I was actually going through folder by folder in our collection storage, going through them very carefully, of course, but going through folder by folder looking for images that would reflect the spirit of this exhibit when I came across this photo. And of course, I was immediately like, this is the perfect image. I had never seen it before. It was in a collection I didn't know, and I know the collection really well, but we were able to share this. There's I did a count, there's roughly 150 objects in this exhibit. Clement said I made them show a lot. Every single thing has to be prepared, there needs to be a mat board cut and all these things. So you'll see everything very nicely displayed. All of that takes hours and hours and hours of work, and our collections and management access staff have been working tirelessly for a couple months now to get this right. We also did 25 interviews with folks, some of whom are here, who shared with me their stories, their experiences, and it's through what I learned in that process that made me realize that there's a really, really great and really moving story here that included Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, which was the original request by our volunteers. But it was beyond that was the age that people were as Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. It was about being of that age and going through camp. And there are things even before the war. So one of the things that I try to do here at the museum, because I grew up in Japan actually. I know from my name it doesn't seem like it, but I am indeed an Anderson, but also from Japan. So I try very much to include in our exhibits aspects of the Japanese-speaking, Japanese-read parts of the community. And so things like this. So this is a photo. This is of the Daiichi Rakugakuin. It's a graduation photo from 1940. But one of the things I love about this is you see the football, swimming, the sports banners in the background. If you look close, you can see these banners in the background that are so representative, right, of Japanese, of Nisei culture, that they were all in these sports leagues, but these kids were also learning Japanese, so it represents sort of that duality that they experienced. Probably my favorite discovery as I was going through looking for photos is this. This is a photo from, it said probably late 1941 to early 1942, so right when Pearl Harbor happens. This is a group of boys in front of the Matsuoka Pharmacy in Los Angeles, being the most all-American 1940s boys I've ever seen in my life. Right? You got your boy with his Sony pop. They're all reading comics. You know, it's like bar gang. They look like they're just gonna like jump up and go get into shenanigans down the street. Right? This is a photo again that was part of another collection that was donated. I think this one is from 2003. That has been sitting in our collection, you know, carefully protected and preserved for such an occasion as this. But this is something that I had never seen before. I'm so excited we could use for this. This is a oldie but a goodie, but I just wanted to highlight that we have these amazing images. So this is a photo that just so to me represents the spirit of kids. This is from the collection of Ike Hachimonji, who was a former volunteer. He passed away a few years ago. He was another one of the, what I call the instigators of this entire project. He wanted us to do this exhibit. He was in Boy Scouts in Heart Mountain, and you'll see him sort of throughout the exhibit. But this is a photo from his collection of the bus that's taking him to Pomona Assembly Center. And there are guards standing in front, and yet he, as a 13-year-old boy, cannot resist the urge to ham it up for the camera, right? And to me, that is such, like, even when there's possible danger, kids are still kind of, you know, boys will be boys, kind of, and he's being a little goofball. For the camera on a day when he's going to camp, and I feel like this, again, really captures that spirit. And, you know, we are so fortunate to be the main repository of objects from camp. Things that either people took with them, things that they produced there, things that they made themselves. And so we are putting on display all sorts of amazing things that kids made or were involved with. These are photos of people in their barracks rooms. Again, the photo on the left of the boys, there's actually a girl in the background. Teeny tiny photo this big that we came across in the collection, but to get a glimpse of what life was like for them. And these are unlike the sort of the government photos that you see that are staged. This is a candid photo of what kids are actually up to. There's Ike playing his drum. But so you'll see there is quite a lot of Boy Scout stuff, but I wanted to highlight the shirt. So this is a shirt from Poston. It's Troop 100. Troop 100, they chose their number in order to honor the 100th Infantry Battalion in Poston. So it's a very special troop, and we're lucky enough that a family donated their loved one's shirt to us. So this is part of the display. We also have we have a couple of incredible Girl Scouts collections. We have a very large collection from a troop in Rower and another one in Minidoka, and also some lovely photos from Crystal City with their Girl Scouts. So you'll see some great Girl Scout stuff. Okay, these are things I just want to highlight because I personally love them, and I get very emotionally attached to some objects. That trophy is for table tennis tournament in Poston. It was won, the third place trophy was won by Entrenews. And I just love that somebody made a wood, this is a wood blade trophy, right? They put it on and did the thing. I don't know how to describe it. I've done it, I don't know how to describe it. Anyway, they made this wooden trophy and posted, and it's just, I love that there's a third place trophy for table tennis. It tickles me. This sketch, so this is one of multiples that you'll see up there, and this boy was in Manzanar, and he wanted one of his friends outside, a white friend, probably his best friend, and actually it was the friend who donated this collection to us, and he made about 5 sketches of different types of activities he was in. to share with his friend what life was like in Myanmar. And they're so representative of sort of like teens and the era. It's such a 1940s sort of thing, but it also shows the importance of that friendship, right? That he wanted his friend to know what his life was like, and that friend held on to these and then gave them to us eventually. And so we are a repository for people's personal treasures. So these are from Crystal City, and actually the photo on the smaller photo is actually not in our collection. It's something that the family has given us permission to use. In Crystal City, because it was essentially a place where they had people, to send in prisoner of war exchanges. The Japanese side, so there's a Japanese side, a German side. On the Japanese side, Scouts was operated according to Japanese Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. So that's why the Boy Scouts, so the little boys, you see their outfits don't look quite like what we would think of as Boy Scouts from that time. It's actually Japanese Boy Scouts, but in Texas. The Girl Scouts included Nikkei Peruvian girls, because the Peruvians were in Crystal City. Okay, so these banners, it was a lot of work to get these banners. We brought in a textile conservator to look through them, examine them, to make sure that we could display them safely. But we have some amazing banners of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. This bass drum, you may recognize it. It used to be in common ground. This has also had to receive some conservation work, and we've repurposed. I sort of stole it for this exhibit because it is, not only was it used in a machi, but before the war, it was part of the Drum and Bugle Corps equipment set for Troop 64, which was Centenary Methodist Church's troop. And before the war, the flags were actually American flag and Japanese flag, which they painted over the Japanese flag when the war started. And if you look really carefully, you can kind of still see the outline of the circle. Okay, so this is more just amazing Girl Scout stuff, which I just, look for it. Some of these things are smaller than you would, think of based on this presentation, but just lovely handmade things, hand-printed things. Another thing, so I'm also just sharing with you the things that I got really excited about, which may seem strange, but they have model airplane clubs in almost every single camp, which I just cannot get over. I just find this so fascinating. So they used to race them. They would race them competitively. They would put on exhibits. They all had names. But this is a kid named Kazuya who was imposted with his plane, and this is also in our collection. So I was like, do we have photos of model airplanes? And sure enough, we did, because we have so many things. This is so each of these things, as you can tell, I get excited about everything because they're just all so amazing. But this is, somebody did this watercolor in Tule Lake, and it's called Tulean characters. So it's like archetypes. So the man in the white shirt says Kibe Boy. He's reading a Japanese magazine called Gendai, so he's also an intellectual Kibe Boy. Then there's Nisei Boy. Then Hoshidan Kid, you can tell he's got his head shaved, so he's in the Hoshidan. Then Nisei, who's sort of a zoot suiter, right? He's the hip kid. He's too cool for school. Then there's Issei Obasan, then Issei Artist. And I have a whole section about sort of Issei anxieties about their kids turning into zoot suiters, which I won't get into now because I will talk about forever. It's really funny to me. But also I love that the Nisei, the kid who's just the Nisei, is kind of the kind of who looks like an Issei parent's worst nightmare. I'm sure all the Issei are like, no, don't hang out with him. He's the delinquent. But he probably just thought he was really cool. And then, of course, dancing. Dancing is such a big part of young people's lives in camp. And we have some amazing photos of kids dancing in the barracks, like these just snapshots that capture these important moments. And you'll see how, so these are all the original size of these photos are like this. And you'll see upstairs how Clement, who designed the exhibit, has worked his magic and transformed these things into amazing large murals and images where you feel like you're actually there physically. And then finally, I just want to highlight how one of the things that really hit me as I was interviewing a lot of people, that was that for the men, so the boys who grew up to be men, almost entirely they served in the Korean War. And that we don't think about Japanese American Korean War service as much because it doesn't have the same, sort of symbolic meaning as the 442nd, right? So, but all of these men they spent their childhood in camp. Then they had to re-enroll in schools with hostile teachers and classmates. They had to find a new life again as children with very little sort of control over their own lives. Often the parents living in different places because jobs didn't allow them to live as a family. Those years were really, really hard. And then they were drafted and served in the Korean War, but when they came home, they weren't celebrated the way the older Nisei have been. So I really wanted to make sure that we honor the Korean War service of this group of Nisei. So you'll see, we were really fortunate that it just so happened that the Korean War vets had just donated their flag and banner to us, so you'll see that. Those are the kinds of things that we take, and we're very fortunate to have that. But we also have photos of, so this is at Cape Kazuya with the plane. This is him somewhere in this photo, now in an integrated unit, right, somewhere in northern Korea. Some of the people I interviewed were involved in some of the first fighting in the Korean Peninsula, so before the U.S. Army was prepared, where they were sort of, overextended, and it sounded terrifying. I heard a lot of stories that probably are just the tip of the iceberg of their memories of combat, but I wanted to make sure that we honor that service. So in the end, this exhibit doesn't have a nice, neat bow on top of it, because I don't think that there's any, sort of conclusion that we can put on this experience, because it's still going, right? We're still understanding the effects of incarceration on children. We're starting to talk about things like, childhood trauma, and how even if you're not aware that you were exposed, that you have experienced trauma, that it comes out in different ways. We're just starting to explore things like intergenerational trauma, how unresolved trauma can get passed down through generations. And I think those are all the things that are the long-term effects and consequences of this kind of injustice. And so I don't have a nice, neat, conclusion at the end, except for the question of what has changed and what has remained the same. Because what I wanted folks to do, the main audience is for those who went through this experience themselves. I'm hoping that this exhibit will feel like their exhibit, your exhibit, that you will feel recognized and seen and represented in it. But I also want this exhibit to be something that connects with a larger audience, because everybody comes of age, right? Every single person is going to or has, is currently or has. So we can all relate to that experience of being a kid and trying to figure out who we are, and figuring out who our friends are and how to understand our separation from our parents. That's a universal experience. So I'm hoping that this will be something that will connect with a broad audience, that they can come through, and by recognizing that coming of age connection, they will be able to more fully understand the injustice and harm that comes through this mass incarceration. And so I want to leave them with a more active question, to ask them, okay, now that you've seen this, now what? Where are we today? What is going on for us today? And how do we take the lessons of this experience and move forward? This is not just history, right? These are lessons for us today. So I hope that you all enjoy this. There's a lot of stuff in it, but please take your time and check everything out. Every single, even the smallest pins, we've thought through very carefully and selected them. There's also an audio guide, So not everyone I know has a smartphone, but if you have a smartphone, you can scan the QR code and hear the voices of those 25 people I interviewed. Those are incorporated as an audio guide in the exhibit. So there you have it. That's Don't Fence Me In. Thank you all. We couldn't have done this without your contributions and your support over the years, and that's your behind the scenes look. So thank you very much.